I'm your host, Bill Snow, and this is the Late to Grid podcast. I'm in the Atomic Autosports studio to bring you another episode of an inspiring motorsports journey. This week, I have John Troche, who's an autocrosser and 79 years old. He's going to share his journey with us, his advice with us, and we're going to learn what really gets him excited about autocross. Let's throw the green flag on this episode. John, thanks for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. And I really want to start off. This is the question ever since you and I shared some emails. I got to ask this question. How does a 22-year-old acquire a Cobra?
Well, the 22-year-old had been interested in cars forever. The Cobra was my dream car. When everyone else in high school had the Playboy pull-up on their lockers, inside of their locker doors, I had the Cobra pictures. I was looking for a car on my way to look at a car, and sticking out behind the office of the used car lot was about 2 feet of the nose of a Cobra. So I had to stop and look at it, not expecting it to be for sale, but it was. And $3,000 and a used motorcycle later, I had a 1963 Cobra, the 50th one they made.
That is amazing. And how long did you keep that car?
I had it 15 years. So no, I don't still have it. And no regrets. It was an exciting journey, and just consider it to be the kind of the luckiest guy in the world to stumble across one and be able to get it.
Now, for the listeners, that was an AC Cobra, which
Correct.
Is different than the Shelby Cobras that a lot of folks are familiar with.
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion in terms of AC Cobra, Shelby Cobra. The original ones even had a different emblem that said AC Cobra. Mine was the 50th one they made, which still had the Lucas electrical system.
Lucky you.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes it would start, sometimes it wouldn't. But yeah, there was a difference. There was two models of the Cobra. The early ones, in fact, the first 75 had a 260 cubic inch motor, which mine had. Then they went to the more familiar 289, which is what you typically saw in some of the early Cobra races. And then, of course, the real Shelby Cobra was the 427, which was a totally different car than just the original AC Ace with a Ford motor stuffed in it.
All right. So I know differences between AC and Shelby, but have you ever been to the Shelby Museum in Vegas?
No, I have not.
If you get the chance, it's really cool. A lot of great examples of the cars, a lot of the history.
Yes.
Too.
Yes.
So, like most of my guests, family got you interested in motorsports. And it was your father who introduced you to some racing and took you to Indy 500,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Somehow it just seems like maybe it's a genetic thing you're born with to some extent. I got my first, I'll call it race car at age 5, which was one of those pedal station wagons. And the logical thing to do was race my friend with his pedal fire engine. And it just seems like my dad was, as you say, interested in cars, went to stock car races. We used to time his cars 0 to 60 with the stopwatch, which was big thrill. But he always kind of tried to impress me that if you do this safely and you do it in a controlled area, then you're not going to be as likely to mess around on the street. And he also told me if I did mess around on the street, that was the last time I ever drove one of their cars. So, yeah, and those words stuck.
So he never caught you.
It never caught me.
There we go.
Yeah.
So did he ever do any competition, get behind the wheel?
No, never did.
But supported you?
Yeah. When I started racing, we'd be out in the garage. I was still living at home. When we'd be out in the garage working on it at midnight, as typically happens, and he would continually say, I don't know why you're pouring all this money down this rat hole. What do we got to do next? And he was my early pit crew, photographer, brought lunch, whatever it took. So, yeah, very supportive.
So getting behind the wheel in competition, that was first in the Cobra at Mid-Ohio?
Well, my actual first driver school was at Nelson Ledges.
All right.
And there were that was a young lifetime's dreams come true at age 22. but just excitement and also a huge dose of realization of how little I really knew. I'm just jumping in.
Right. What year was that?
That would have been 1968.
Very good.
So it was my only car. It was my daily driver for 3 years prior to that. Snow, whatever, away it went.
Isn't it amazing what we drove back in the day?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Front engine cars, rear wheel drive, light rear end.
Yep.
Still made it to work every day in the snow.
Yes. Yeah.
So after that driver school at Nelson Ledges, then what?
Well, then I started my progression to get, I had to, after the one at Nelson Ledges, I then, you had to go to 2 driver school back then, SCCA driver school, to get your competition license. So from there, I headed to, my first one, I actually had 3 driver school. And I guess you could say I was the slow learner from a mechanical standpoint, not knowing, I said before, realization of what I didn't know. The friend of mine and I realized we need to put a different exhaust on it for a number of reasons. So we thought the simplest thing was to braze the exhaust pipes. So we did that and quickly learned. This was my first driver school. I don't know how many laps, but I soon, basically the exhaust system came off in pieces at various places around the track, much to everybody's delight.
No.
So if you had an embarrassing moment, that was it. You show up ready to race, and within about 2 hours, you're collecting pieces of your exhaust system and asking where there's a local welder. But so after my 2 driving schools at Nelson Ledges, the third one then was at Mid-Ohio. And if there was ever if you want to call it a big thrill, just a lifetime memory, it was that driving school, because my driving instructor was Bob Johnson, who was a factory team driver. And so
For Cobra.
For Cobra, right. Yeah, for Shelby. He drove the coupes, he drove the Cobras all over the world for Shelby. And yet there he was sitting in my car, driving it around the track, basically eating his knees because he was quite a bit taller, and I had the seat bolted in. So, but it's just such a patient guy. I kind of can still picture him sitting there just being so patient. And I'm just kind of sucking it up like a little kid at a baseball game looking at Mickey Mantle.
So while that was happening, while you were on track, what were some of those aha moments that, if you can remember back, that he showed you or that you felt driving around with him?
Both in him driving around with me and also in his critique afterwards. There was a rather modified Corvette that was in the same driver school, and he could out-accelerate me on the straightaway, but we weren't that far apart. And of course, initially, when I'd see him brake, then I'd slam on my brakes at the end of the long Mid-Ohio straight. And I do remember Bob Johnson telling me, "You've got far more brakes and far less weight than he does. When you see him brake," I forget the exact phrase that he used, but "you've got time. Dive inside and wait on the brakes." And it was like, oh, okay, he told me to do it. And sure enough, I mean, stuff like that maybe I would have never picked up on.
Right. So you got the competition license.
Yes.
Did you go into club racing then?
Yes, I did.
All right. Tell us about that.
Well, my first club race was probably one of the most memorable. It was a regional race at Nelson Ledges, and it was the weekend before a big national race. And I don't know if this still happens, but back then there were a lot of folks that showed up that wouldn't normally show up to a regional race simply to do that final dialing in of their car and so on. So with the Cobra, I was in B production, and so the race I was in was the big bores. It was A and B production, A and B sedan. So it was Mustangs, Shelby Mustangs, Cobras. There was, I think, 3 Cobras there, if I remember right, and lots and lots of Corvettes, 30-some cars on the grid at Nelson Ledges back in the day when the track was pretty narrow, mm-hmm. and with as many bumps as it had and potholes as it had for 30, 40 years. And the starts were standing starts. So basically, I was not on the pole. As one would expect, that I'd not be on the pole. I was back somewhere around 10, 11 rows. So when the flag drops, all of a sudden, all I saw was dust and smoke and maybe 2 or 3 cars in front of me. And at Nelson back then, that first corner was probably an 80-mile-an-hour corner. But you knew you had however many cars behind you, so you just kind of had to go. So you went into the first corner, not seeing more than 3 or 4 cars in front of you. It was probably an 80-mile-an-hour corner. You're 2 abreast, and that was like, okay, you wanted the race. You're in it.
Here you are.
Here you are. Yeah, and it was, I never got past my regional license. So back then you had to have 2 novice races as a regional. And then I believe it was 4 more regional races before you could get a national license. And then family moving and so on. And I thought, well, just put the career, notice that word, illusions on hold, and someday go back to it. But that was certainly probably the most aha moment. Not the scariest moment, but I went off the straightaway. My throttle stuck at the kink in Nelson.
Oh, no.
You're a little over 100 there and back in the day. And I lifted, and nothing happened. But back then, they didn't have tire walls. They just had big open fields. So luckily, it just kind of went straight off and a few bounces, and it was like realization of what could have happened long after.
Oh, right. So are you still daily driving the Cobra?
No.
Okay.
By that time, I had, my parents gave me a great deal on what was, I don't even remember the year, but an old Dodge Dart. So that was and then I did buy a used Chevy station wagon, which was my tow car.
and probably your camper too.
And my camper.
Yeah, see?
And we had converted a $50 boat trailer into kind of what can you say, something that, not what you should have hauled a Cobra on. But,
but it worked.
It sort of worked, yeah.
Yeah, the good old days of grassroots racing.
Yeah.
So after you stopped regional racing,
yes,
when did you find autocross?
I didn't find autocross till actually my son Josh found autocross. I was looking to go back, they were out of college. Holly and Josh were both done with school, and I wanted to do something. I'd done street rods while the family was growing up and put everybody in, Holly and Josh in the back seat and go get ice cream type of thing. Mm-hmm. I wanted to do something different. And so I wanted to go, I thought, back on the track. So, in fact, he and I went to Indianapolis and took a Legends driving course, the little Legends stock car.
Oh, yeah.
And I went down to Charlotte and took a Legends course, and I thought, maybe. And then I went and looked at an ITP car for SECA racing. But I have a lot of hobbies. And one of the things I did learn way back when, in my brief racing endeavors, was that racing is something that requires your full attention. And that if you have 6 different interests going on, you don't belong on the track. That maybe with my other hobbies, did I want to give them up to go racing again? And Josh was autocrossing. I thought, well, I'll just buy a car and we'll go autocross together. So that's what got me doing something competitively again in cars.
So what car did you go and buy and start autocrossing?
Well, he had a Fiero, so of course I had to go buy a Fiero.
Oh boy, a Fiero.
Yeah. So we had, he had a red one, I had a black one, and away we went with a lot to learn as well.
Yeah.
Then, I was going to say, then he only did it for a couple of years. So then I decided I was going to get more serious with it. And I did.
So tell us about autocrossing a Fiero. What year Fiero was it?
Mine was the 88, so that was the one with the Lotus design suspension.
Okay.
It was a fun car, but it would also, you had a chance to see where you'd come from fairly often if you weren't really understanding how the car was handling.
Yeah, but it did okay for you.
It was okay. It was a good start, good place to start. And really, that was the thing with autocross is it almost doesn't matter what car you have as long as it's not one with a high center of gravity.
Mm-hmm.
Show up and have at it. Have fun.
Now I'm going to be digging through those pictures from Lakeland to see if I see those Fieros.
Oh, well, we never made it to Lakeland.
Oh, all right.
It was typically just at the Goodyear parking lot and at the Firestone lot. There was a lot at Firestone where it was a building that they no longer used, and the lot was behind it, and they usually brought a lawnmower to mow the weeds on the track before we'd run, so it wasn't the perfect surface.
No. Then what car did you move into after the Fiero?
After Fiero, I got a 1990 BMW E30 M3, and that was a special car.
Yes, those are great looking, great handling.
Yeah. And I kind of stumbled on it, both on the car and on some changes to it, and ended up being really very competitive with that car. I did national level events. I did the Sendiv series all over the Midwest. Got tire sponsorship, doing some marketing with it and so on. So that was a fun car to really get serious about autocrossing with.
Yeah, and those, I don't know if you've seen the prices on those lately.
Yes. Yeah, some of my friends say, oh, you had a Cobra and you sold it? You had an E30 M3 and you sold it? What do you have now that you're selling so we can buy it?
Yeah, exactly. And then after the BMW M3, then what?
Well, I retired, so retired from work.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought you got to save money. So I sold the car, I sold the trailer, I sold the camper that was towing it. And then probably a year, maybe 2 years, I didn't go. And then I went and thought, I miss seeing some of my friends. You have a nice social circle, very helpful, friendly people that you've known for years now. But I'll just go ride with them. And that was really a good thing, but if you can say you were trying to stay away from it, a mistake, because it's a disease. It never leaves. So it was just being exposed to it again. It took me about 3 weeks, and I bought a Mini Cooper, thinking I don't want to do the modified route. I just want to take my lunch, go have fun with my friends, and then I found out I had bought a modified Mini Cooper. So it must have been somebody's hobby car, and it had a number of engine mods and really no suspension mods. But we took care of changing that, changes the suspension, of course, as you get into it. And I did that for about 10 years with the Mini.
So that's something you and I have in common. We both had 2005 Mini Cooper R53s.
Correct.
Yeah, one car. And as I was modifying mine, that's one of the things I like to talk about too, is if you're going to modify a car, and I know you didn't do yours other than suspension, read the rules where you're going to be playing.
Right.
Because when I modified my car, which, I wanted the, reduced supercharger pulley and, cold air, all this other stuff. Well, now I was in SMF.
Yes.
And it's easy to be outspent.
Yep.
And uncompetitive.
Yes.
Is that what happened to you too? Same.
Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, I ran, how they call it, street, I think, class back then. I think it was called stock, but I had the hood up, and somebody who really knew minis walked by and said, "You've got an underdrive pulley." And it was like, I do? And so, okay, there's the voice of a cheater who pretending he does, but I didn't know.
Yeah.
I really didn't. So it turns out mine had underdrive pulley, big injectors, several other things. And so I was kicked into SMF also.
Yeah. I do miss that car.
Oh, yeah, it was fun. The thing, I enjoyed it. I really did. But trying to teach an old guy who's rear-wheel drive for his whole life, when you got to do everything exactly, not everything, but a lot of things exactly the opposite when you're driving the Mini, that was a hard challenge. And I got better with it, but I decided before someone prized the key out of my hands that I wanted rear-wheel drive. So I sold the Mini.
Yeah. And you're in a rear-wheel drive car now.
Correct.
Right? Tell us about that.
Well, I was thinking about it and looking at, okay, if I sell the Mini, what could I get that's rear-wheel drive? I started, obviously, with the rear-wheel, two-seater sports car. I thought, geez, at some point, I'm going to have to stop doing this. So maybe this time to look for that car. And I asked a friend of mine, I said, geez, I'm thinking about a Nissan 350Z. And I knew he had one, and I just said, what can you tell me about it? And he says, "You thinking to buy one?" And I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Well, buy mine." And he was a very competitive driver. He raced SCCA for over 20 years and had just a few things on the car that made it better. Stiffer bars, adjustable camber, and a Quaife limited slip. And that kicked me into a modified class. But at this point in my racing endeavors, I'm not necessarily trying to win class. I'm trying to see how many people I can beat competitively and have fun.
That's the key, having fun.
Yeah, and it's a fun car. I really like it.
Let's take a moment and talk about your current season. What events have you done? How's it going?
Well, it's a little bit of a learning experience. The transition from front-wheel drive to rear-wheel drive is what I'd hoped for, going relatively smoothly, but it's also got probably 100 more horsepower. And I found that on the Mini, certain times front-wheel drive, mash the gas and pull yourself out of the corner. Mashing the gas in 100 more horsepower in an autocross with a stiff rear bar probably wasn't the right thing. Press on the gas, don't mash the gas type of thing. But I'd say it's going fairly well. I've been able to, one of the clubs I run with has a shootout at the end, and the top 16 cars, and it's just on raw time. And I've been able to make that a couple times.
Oh, cool.
So, and that's, just that competitive. If you're doing this, you love competition. And if someone isn't doing it and loves competition, obviously this is a very safe, easy to get into way to experience that competitive, satisfy that competitive urge that you have. So yeah, it's fun. And of course you have certain cars that they should beat you, and when you're able to beat them, there's that competitive challenge, success feeling again.
Right. So what groups are you running with today?
Well, sometimes I'll run with the SCCA in the Ohio group. Sometimes I'll run with the Steel Cities group. And then because it's about 15 minutes from my house, I run with Akron Sports Car Club. They run at Dragway 42, and you think down a drag strip. No, they don't run on that. There's probably 2 miles of paved pit roads. And so what they'll do is they'll set up, I really call it a mini road course. Some of the courses will be a mile long. I've hit 75 miles an hour on one of the straightaways, which is not typical of a local autocross.
Right.
But there's good runoff if in case someone blows through a corner and so on. So I have run probably most of the events I've run there, but I do run with the Ohio at times, and also pit race. And then I've gone out to Toledo as well.
So for the person that wants to get into what we're talking about,
right,
and wants to take that first step towards autocross, what advice would you offer them?
Do it. Pretty simple. You do need a helmet. Most of the clubs, once COVID hit, don't have loaner helmets anymore. So you do need to get a helmet. But in all honesty, that would be your only expense to show up at an event and say, this is my first time. All the clubs have rookie classes. You'll have a special guided tour of the course with helpful information as to how to approach your first run there. So it's not this daunting challenge when they've been to Mid-Ohio and watched the cars and the preparation and everything. You do obviously want a car that's in good condition, but it can be basically whatever car you have, whatever tires are on it. A lot of people think, I got to have it modified. I got to have these big sticky tires. And probably the best advice would be, don't do that to start. Just get in the car, get some seat time, get someone to help you. Listen to the people that have been doing it for a while. They'll ride with you. They'll take you on rides. It's legal to have a passenger in an autocross car if it's properly equipped with seat belts and so on. And just show up and do it. And there's, obviously you can find the information on any of the social media, Facebook and so on. They almost all have sites that would provide that information.
So that raises a point. How did you know about the driver school at Nelson back in the late 60s? How'd you find out about that?
I had joined Sports Car Club of America, and back then the meetings were typically attended by more people because there wasn't the social media.
Yeah. I was reflecting on just that topic the other day as, back when we were younger.
Right.
You couldn't jump on a Facebook and say, what's going on this weekend?
No.
You had to rely on word of mouth or meetings.
Yep.
Mailed newsletters.
Yes. Yeah. You used to get the SCCA monthly newsletter. Now you better see it online.
That's right. What's the one tool or supply you always forget when you go to an autocross?
That's a good question. And I think I'm pretty well organized after all these years. I started doing this in 1995, and I had 3 or 4 years out in the middle there, but I've basically been doing it. Well, in fact, people ask, when was your first event? My first event was in 1961 in my mother's Peugeot sedan. So you get a routine, and that routine to me is extremely important. And the fact that I drive my car, it's not a race car. I don't have to worry about special equipment or changing things at the last minute at the track. I'm not going through changing settings. Mm-hmm. So, making sure that the tires are set. People, what'll happen is you'll leave the car sit in the sun, and you thought you'd check the tires, and then all of a sudden your group is called and you happen to be near the front of it, and the tires that were in the sun are 4 pounds higher than the tires that were in the shade. And you wonder why those left-handers just didn't stick. Tire pressure.
Right. Pay attention to the details.
Yeah. The other thing is preparation before the event in learning the track, because that's different with autocross than road racing. Mid-Ohio is pretty much going to be sure that sometimes they'll use a slightly different layout, but Mid-Ohio is basically Mid-Ohio. At an autocross, you have no idea what the track is going to look like. And sometimes they're posted the night before, but in most cases till you get there. And so that preparation is probably the most important thing. Too many people they see their buddies, and that you walk the track before the event. So they'll walk around with their buddies, and they're laughing and joking about what they did, the night before and so on. And they'll maybe walk twice, or some places will let you use a push scooter or ride a bike around. You need to walk the track, and I always try to do is, there's guys, after you've been there, you'll know who really knows what they're doing, who are the drivers that are always at the top of the pack. So I see where they're at. I just hang around, and when they start to walk the track, you mind if I walk with you? Because when they go through it, they're probably pretty serious about it. Mm-hmm. And being able to ask them questions, see what they're talking about, count the steps. There's usually slaloms on the course. So to pace off the slalom, a number of steps between each cone on the slaloms, what I do is I use MapMyRun as an app on my phone. And when I go through a slalom, I walk pretty far, not with the line I'll follow, but I accentuate the slalom so it shows up on a little diagram that MapMyRun does. Or when I come to what's called a Chicago box, which is just kind of a quick little detour. Same thing, it'll show up on my MapMyRun. I also then use a voice recorder. And so when I go through the slalom, first cone 32 paces, next cone 31, or they'll have all of them equal except the last cone, which they tighten up by 4 paces. So you find you go storming through the slalom, it's working great till you get to that last one. And of course, chances are if you didn't pay attention, you're going to wipe out that last cone or be so hard on the brakes that you mess up the next section of the course and so on. So that figuring out how are you going to learn the course And you might not run. If you walked in the morning, you might not run until noon or afterwards. So, particularly if you're an old guy, how are you going to remember that? So to do something that allows you to document the course, study it while you're eating lunch, rather than there's time to talk to your friends, rather than making it just a social hike around the course. If I forget anything, someone I haven't seen for a while, and all of a sudden I'm doing exactly what I said not to.
What's next? What do you want to do 2025? Same cars, same programs?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
This I tend to keep cars. The Cobra was 15 years. The M3 was about 11 years. The Mini was 10 years. So, and I really like this car. So, yeah, this is it. I don't have a desire to do the bigger events anymore with the modifications on the car, as you talked about earlier. I need lots more modifications if I'm going to be competitive in the class. I might go to like a Toledo big event. It's run at the Toledo airport. The courses are large, a lot of good competition to measure yourself against. And so maybe there. But I'm content just showing up and getting to satisfy that adrenaline rush competitive urge.
Yeah. So as you want to learn more about being a better autocrosser, what resources do you turn to?
Well, in fact, I even brought a book along that I've had for years, Winning Autocross, Solo 2 Competition, The Art and the Science. And I thought the title's interesting because there is kind of an art to it, but there's also a science to it. And this is, it was written in 1977. So yeah.
Wow.
But the science of adhesion, of side slip, of apex, of late apex, those things I don't think have dramatically changed over the years. But I still refer to this. Can't sleep some night. I'll have it and just glance at a chapter, and it's interesting. It's a hobby. It's something you want to always learn more about. And someone can just Google autocross books at Amazon, and you'll find 2 or 3 that it's probably not a bad idea to get one. And some of it you'll say, eh, and others you'll say, wow.
Yeah, if you even just pick up one tip.
Yes.
And maybe that helps.
Enormously.
Then it's worth it, right?
Yeah. And I found that statement is really a profound statement, I think. If you could pick up one tip every time you went to an event, or every season, one tip, you would find, I think, a significant improvement. The other thing would be to ask for rides with people that obviously are good. And when it's, if there's enough runs, most of them will be glad to give you a ride. And when you watch how they do it, significant. If I offer one more tip?
Awesome, yes.
GoPros. This has always been something, and actually this is something that Josh pointed out to me at one point. I was kind of doing it, but he really made it very obvious that this is what you need to do. Most people mount the GoPro either on the roof or the hood, or inside. And that's kind of interesting. Great posts for Facebook. But the best way to do it is to take a GoPro, and it's worth getting one just for this. Get the suction cup mount, put it just behind the front wheel, above the cone height. But, and you could ask me how I know that. But put it on the left side of the car, do 2 runs, then put it on the right side. Did you hit the apex? Oh, I thought I was right on that cone. And you find there was that much room. You gave up, didn't use a lot of the pavement. Those are the types of things that'll make your next run better. You can look at it between runs, or certainly take a look when you get home.
That's great advice. What didn't we talk about that you wanted to?
I just think the fact that the hobby satisfies so many different things if you have any car interest. There's a social aspect to it. I mean, people are in golf leagues. Not my thing, but there's certainly a social aspect to it. Whether it's bowling or golf or pickleball or whatever else, there's a competitive part to it. There's a social part to it, and autocross, I think, has that in spades. People are so helpful. You think this is a competitive sport, dog eat dog. If you've been to the stock car race, maybe you've seen them fighting in the pits afterwards, or NASCAR where one guy's well, there's a lot more at stake. So anybody will help you. Something breaks, some people offer you, well, drive my car.
Mm-hmm.
It's just such a welcoming group, but yet competitive. There's an adrenaline component to it. Back to your original statement, someone that wants to start, the best words of advice you can say is do it.
Just go out there and do it.
Yep. It's compared to any other form of racing, it is as cheap as you're going to get. Now, you can make it expensive, but it is as inexpensively as you're going to race, I think.
Yeah. Well, John, thanks so much for sharing your motorsports journey with us.
Well, thanks for asking me.
Yeah.
I mean, this was something that was, when you're in this, if someone asks you to talk about it, they're in trouble.
Well, good luck the rest of the season.
Thanks so much. I appreciate that.
And thank you, our listener, for listening to this episode of the Late to Grid podcast. Be sure to tell a friend about the show. And if you have the opportunity, leave us a review. It certainly helps spread the word about grassroots racing. And do me a favor, don't be late to grid.